Hi everyone, we're just getting ourselves ready now to start the MBA webinar in this series. Next to me, we're very honoured to have Professor Guy Ford, who's looking after the MBA program, and I think you also built it, didn't you?
Yes.
You created it.
Yes, we did. So it's a relatively new program, having closed the older, more traditional MBA. And so it's now into its second cohort of students.
It's very exciting stuff. What I love saying is that we're the oldest university in the country with the newest and most innovative MBA. And I think you can't get a better combination than that. Bit of housekeeping before we start off. If you have logged in, we would love you to go down to the bottom and find the conversation box and tell us where you're from. We'd love to know where you're coming in from. So it's called the chat box. You'll find it at the bottom of your screen. Just give us a shout out and tell us where you're from. We're already up to 10 participants and we're expecting another 20 or 30 to join us as well. This is an unusual opportunity. We often come out and we come to different countries, but this is your opportunity to visit us here on campus and ask the questions that you have about the MBA program. As was mentioned, we're just getting into our second cohort now, and I've been very fortunate to actually meet a lot of the candidates, and they're just an amazing group of people. It really is quite an exciting time to be doing these things. Now, the other part of the housekeeping is that as you put your questions in, and you can do so at the chat box at the bottom, we'll have a look at them as we go along and we'll sort of triage them as we see them. If there's something that we feel we can answer on the spot, we might just jump in and do it there. If things are a bit complicated or a bit too specific, we might take them offline and answer them at a later time. At the end, we will have a contact list, and please feel free to take a snapshot or a screenshot of that contact list at that point, and you can then ask further questions at your leisure later on. You've registered, and that will allow you to watch this again later at another point if you wish to do so. And you can also pass on the link to colleagues or friends who might have missed it. We've just got a shout out from Mike Reed. Great to have you with us, Mike. Other participants, please let us know where you're from. I'm not sure. Oh, based in Sydney. So the first one is just down the road here, but we hope to be hearing from folks from further abroad than that. If you've just joined us, we're about to kick off in about a minute, just making sure that we're giving those last few people a moment to log in. All right, the first few slides will just be me talking about the University of Sydney in general, and I'll make that as quick as possible so that we have a lot more time to talk about the MBA program. There is a lot to talk about because it is so new and it is different from a lot of MBA programs you'll be used to. I suspect most MBA programs claim that they're different, but I think you'll see by the end of this presentation that it's genuinely the case. Hi, Bruno from Brazil. Great to see you. Oh, Georgios from the Netherlands. Wonderful. Thanks for joining us. Any more folks? Find the chat box at the bottom and let us know where you're in from. Oh, Oved from Mexico. I was just in Mexico not too long ago. It's an amazing country. All right, well, thanks, guys. We're just going to get into it now. Welcome to the Live at Sydney webinar series, and this episode is Study the MBA. Where are we? All right, just so that you know, there are a number of other webinars coming up as well. Just take a note of that, and I'll give you a moment to pull your phone out and make a photo of that if you feel that any of those are interesting to you as well. All right, the million-dollar question, why study at the University of Sydney at all? We're the oldest university in the country, and I would argue one of the most prestigious. It's in the city of Sydney, which is a world-class city to live in, and it's regularly voted in the top 10 of the most livable cities in the world. The metrics on that are, availability of employment, cost of living, availability of different events and social social things that go on within the city as well. It is highly multicultural, not just on campus, but in the whole city. We've all experienced walking down the street and hearing a multiple number of languages around us at the same time. People sometimes ask me what's Australian cuisine, and my answer is always, what do you want it to be tonight? Because you do have that range of opportunities to you. It is a beautiful city, and that'll only adds to the experience of studying here. Just so you've got a bit of the geography of the city, this is a photograph taken looking up towards the city, or what we call the city centre or CBD. Those in North America might refer to it as downtown. You'll see the Opera House there, and the tall buildings at the top of the picture is the Central Business District. And within that is our city campus, which our MBA program is run from. Are any of the classes operating on main campus, or is it all in that building?
All in that building in the centre of Sydney.
Would there be opportunities for students to come up onto main campus for other events?
Yes, they do. They come for all sorts of events that support the curriculum, but are not necessarily the classes themselves.
Fantastic. So you see that picture there, that's going to show you where the city campus is, but directly behind all those tall buildings is the campus of the University of Sydney, the main campus. That gives you the same information more or less on a stylized map, and it's just the other way around that. So where you see that image of the Harbour Bridge, down towards that end is where you're going to see the city campus, sort of halfway between the big red section, which is main campus, and the Harbour Bridge. You'll see a red circle, and that's the city campus. The City of Sydney has wonderful public transport. I encourage you not to drive if you come here. Get yourself an Opal card and get around the city as quickly and efficiently as you can. Australia's oldest, Australia's first university, established in 1850, modelled on Oxford and Cambridge. If you ever get bored, you can have a look at our logo, and you'll see the Cambridge line and the Oxford book, because those two universities helped us to establish about 160 years ago. I'm not a huge fan of ranks, but if you are looking at ranking systems, we do quite well. But do keep in mind that because of the nature of our institution, a very broad university, we have to compete on all fronts at all times. We do very, very well, but it would be a lot easier if we had fewer fronts that we had to fight that war on. And entry into the University of Sydney is based on academic merit, which is a little bit different from some other institutions that you might be used to around the world. Just to give you a bit of sense of time and our provenance, that building still exists, though all those trees have been moved or changed or something. So this is what we looked like quite a long time ago, and it's a lovely connection with the past and the future. What I like to say is that we're the oldest university, but you could argue that we're one of the newest campuses. We have a lot of new buildings that have gone up. One of the more recent ones is the new business school, which is a beautiful building built around a huge gum tree at the front of it. If you ever get a chance to be in Sydney, it's worth coming just to have a look at that. So the facilities that you'll be working in and around on the campus and in the city campus are all not only very historical, but also very functional and new. They're purpose-built for what they do. Oh, just had Lara from Germany join us as well. Good to see you, Lara. All right, best and brightest minds live here. Politics is a big deal on campus, so much so that 7 of our students have gone on to be Prime Ministers of Australia. We've got astronauts, Rhodes Scholars, Pulitzer Prize winners, or a Pulitzer Prize winner. And what I'm very proud of is the number of Olympians. Our student athletes are very much student athletes, but these student athletes are operating at that very highest level. What can you study? It's probably easier to ask, what can't you study here? Big, broad university. And if you do have interest in other areas other than the MBA, of course, we'd be able to talk to you about that at a later time. Again, I'm not a big fan of rankings, but students love to talk about rankings, and I'm sure we'll talk a bit about the MBA rankings later on, but that gives you a snapshot of where we sit globally. And you'll notice that we have faculties and areas of study, top 10, top 20 globally, and we're very proud of that. Just be aware our timeline is different. This is the general timeline. It's different from the MBA timeline, so I won't spend too much time going through that. We'll talk more about the specific MBA timeline later so we don't confuse things. Sydney is more than a classroom. Yes, your primary reason to come here is study. Yes, you want to get that degree and help your career and move forward. But while you're in Sydney, please take the time to engage in what's happening on and off campus. Clubs and societies are a wonderful way to meet a new cohort of friends. If you are coming from overseas, getting that first cohort of friends can be difficult, and clubs and societies are a great way to not only engage and indulge in a passion or interest that you might have, but also meet a group of like-minded people while you're doing it. And I think this ranking here is probably the most important of the whole slideshow. Yes, you're coming here for an education, but that has to have a practical outcome at the end of it. And we're extremely proud that we are #1 in Australia and #5 in the world. #6 was Harvard in graduate employability. Oh, and sorry, it's #4 now. That slide's out of date. We've just had that updated. So that's incorrect. We're now #4 in the world. Admissions, HDR, research with impact. Is that the correct slide? Okay. All right. Now you've got a bit of an overview of the University of Sydney. I'm going to hand over to my colleague and the esteemed professor, Professor Guy Ford, who's going to tell you all about the MBA program.
Well, thank you, Chris. As we said, if you have any questions as we proceed, please don't hesitate to send them through, and we'll deal with them as they come. And also, as Chris said, if there is something that's very particular to an individual, then we'll go offline and answer those questions. So I'm going to be talking about the full-time MBA here at the University of Sydney. It has two themes, leadership and enterprise. And by enterprise, we mean building the enterprises of the future, both profit, non-profit, social, government, and as well as developing the leadership skills that are required to succeed and thrive in an increasing ambiguous world. So just so you know the background to where this full-time MBA sits, we have a number of management education programs that are postgraduate. The first is a Master of Management, which is full-time. And we say they're pre-experienced, meaning to get into that program, you do not need to have any work experience at all. So we call that an early career management program. In 2013, we launched our MBA part-time. And for this degree, you do have to have a minimum of 3 years relevant experience. And we have an average of 8 years experience in that program. So these are students who tend to be working in Sydney, and they come in and do their study in the evening or on weekends. We also have a global executive MBA, which was launched in 2010. And these are for people that have significant leadership experience. They have, you can see there, nearly 18 years experience, and over 18 months they travel around the world. The one gap in that suite of management education postgraduate programs was a full-time MBA. And so that's what we launched last year, so 2018. It's also a post-experience MBA, meaning we look at a minimum of 3 years relevant management experience. When we launched it, we targeted students from right around the world. We capped the intake at just 50 students. So this is not a huge volume program, but one of the benefits of just 50 students is that we can handpick students based on their experience, their backgrounds, gender difference, cultural difference. And once we feel that we've reached a quota for a certain region or a certain level of experience, we can sort of close off entry there. And that's the one way that we guarantee that you will have a group of students that you'll be studying with that come from extremely diverse backgrounds. Interestingly, with that first intake last year, nearly 25% of that cohort was from North America, who are very attracted at having an international experience, love the city of Sydney, and they've added a rich vibrancy to the program. Next, approximately 10% were students actually from Australia, and then about 10% again from India, 10% from China, and the rest spread from all around the world. We started with 38 students in that cohort, and then at the middle of this year, we began our second intake with similar types of spread and experience. For this one, we started 46 students, so we're getting very close to our cap. So there's the entry requirements more formally: a minimum of 3 years relevant work experience for the full-time MBA. We want you to have an undergraduate degree from a recognised institution with what we call here a credit average. Now, this depends on different countries and the way degrees are designed, but what we are broadly looking for here is at least an average of 65 out of 100 or higher. We require a statement of motivation, and that's important for us to help us understand what it is that you're hoping to get out of this MBA. And our careers teams can work with that statement of motivation to get some insights into what it is you're hoping to achieve upon graduation from the degree. GMAT is not essential for entry into this program, but we would strongly encourage you to submit that if you have indeed done that. But certainly don't think that that is something that you need to go and do. Of the candidates or the applications that we receive, we screen those, and from that list, we go to interview. So I personally interview all of the candidates for the program. This is about a 20-minute to 30-minute interview where you have an opportunity to ask me questions about the program, and I have an opportunity to ask more about what your goals are with the program. And we have a question that asks, how would we check if the undergraduate degree is good enough? So there's no pre-assessment, but what the university itself does is screen your degree. There are arrangements globally which help us understand whether that would be eligible for entry into the program. So there's really no need for you to worry about that. Just submit your application and then we deal with that. So thank you, and have. Now, some details on the program. The University of Sydney MBA is an 18-month program, so 1.5 years. And we begin in August of each year. So we're there in the Australian winter, but we move into spring and then summer. We run to December, and then we take a break over the Christmas period. And that allows students to sometimes return to their country destination, or just to have a nice holiday period here in Sydney, or indeed travel around the country. Then we then come back and begin again in late January, early February, and work our way through till the end of the year. So 18 months. And we believe that's really the perfect time frame to be able to enable you to experience your skills and the content knowledge and build as you go. We have internships. They are not mandatory, so it is not something that you have to do. But if you do decide to do an internship, we will include that on your transcript. So our careers team will work with you very early on to work out what sort of internship you might be interested in. For us, the internship period is June and July each year, about halfway through June and then most of July. And in Australia, we have to pay. So the organisations that we set up for you must at least pay you the minimum wage that's required under our workplace agreements. We also have an internship opportunity that enables you to get exposure to at least 6 different organisations across 6 different sectors. So this is not the more traditional internship where a student might go and do a bit of work within an organisation for 5 or 6 weeks, get some exposure in terms of what that organisation does, its strategy. And sometimes the students do some desktop research for the organisation. They might conduct some interviews. But the other version of this that we think is quite revolutionary is to get 6 organisations, as I said, across different sectors to actually come to you. So we'll spend a full day with presentations from the organisation, and then the next day the students themselves will go into the organisation and start to gather some data and information. And there's always a theme. So the theme will typically be sustainability, and we'll see it from the perspective of technology companies, from agribusiness, from mining, from telecommunications, from financial services. Now that's quite revolutionary. As I said, it's different, but we believe that students will get much more benefits if they get exposure and work with experts across 6 different sectors in 6 different firms. Now that internship doesn't come with payment, but it is a very engaging and enriching experience, and it will be recognised on your transcript as well. I put here that there are scholarships that are available. There are partial scholarships. They range from 50% of the cost of the program to 20% and some 10%. And they are merit-based, and you do not need to apply for those scholarships. So if we have a candidate that has an excellent CV and we think has excellent promise, we'll use those scholarships to help them get into the program. Currently, the tuition fees are 76,500 Australian for the full 18 months of the program.
Can I jump in there? For those of you in North America, you're going to take 30% off for a US dollar. About 4 years ago, the $2 were at parity. The Australian dollar continues to drop. The US dollar continues to rise. It's probably one of the few universities in Australia that's cheaper now than it was a few years ago to come and study here. And remember that everything, including living expenses, the price is actually decreasing at the moment because of the exchange rates. And from what I hear from our economist colleagues, there's no reason to think that the Australian dollar will surge significantly in the next few years. So you're looking at probably 30% off consistently over the period of study that you would be here. May I just jump in with a question there? What fees are involved apart from the tuition, Professor?
There are some modest fees that will be involved outside of the tuition. Typically, there may be textbooks that you require in some of the units. They're not included in the tuition fee. Full sets of course materials are available as part of the tuition fee. Of course, we require everybody to have a laptop computer. And we tend not to print out large volumes of notes. We upload those electronically so people have access to what they need in the classroom.
Fantastic. Let's finish this slide off and then we'll jump to a couple more questions after.
Well, that's pretty much for this slide. As I said right at the bottom there, the most important part about this program is 1 intake per year capped at 50 students. And part of the reason for that, as we'll see, is this program is highly experiential, meaning we put the students through learning experiences, and it's very hard to develop skills and apply them in a large lecture theatre of 300 or 400 students. In those type of programs, it tends to be more of what I call knowledge transfer. The professor puts up their PowerPoints and transfers the knowledge to the students, and the students typically have to pass an exam at the end. This program is not like that. So this program is developing skills, and to do that we need coaches, we need mentors, and you hone your craft in terms of leadership skills, creativity and creative thinking skills, critical analysis and critical thinking, as I said, and also in terms of thinking in terms of complex systems. These are things that are very hard to teach. These are things that you have to do. So you have to get experience and feedback as you do them.
The next questions come through asking, can students stay in their own accommodation or is there a mandatory in-house program?
No, most students do stay in their own accommodation. So there's not a mandatory in-house program. Most of the students locate somewhere close to the campus. A lot seem to like to live by the ocean. And so we see a lot living in Bondi. And also we have a suburb called Newtown very close by, which is a great food hub. And as Chris said, transport is very good in Sydney. You can get to the classes very easy without having to have a motor vehicle. Some students do stay in accommodation that the university provides as well, but we tend to find once they start in the university accommodation, they prefer to move out of the university down the track just to experience sharing with other students, you know, and probably a more vibrant lifestyle.
All right, next question has come in. How many days of the week do we have classes? How is attendance structured?
So we have classes that run from Monday to Friday, from 9 in the morning till 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Monday to Thursday will be the classes themselves, and you do 2 different subjects or units, as we call them, at a time over a relatively short semester of just 9 weeks. So a typical MBA would have you doing 4 different days a week with 4 different units of study. But we find it's best to do 2 over a shorter period, just so you can consolidate and get a lot of momentum with respect to the content, and you're able to apply it. So Monday to Thursday, 9 to 1 is the classes. In the afternoon, we find the students tend to meet up and start to work on assignments together, group work, and so on, so that hopefully by 5 p.m. in the afternoon, they can go to the gym, they can go home, they can cook dinner and relax. So as a full-time student, it's a bit like going to work. You're there during the day, and then hopefully you have some time for friends, family, and relaxation in the evening.
A follow-up question has come through. How many semesters do we have?
Yeah, so this program is spread over 18 months. So we don't really think of them in terms of semesters, but if you wanted to think that way, it's 3 large semesters of about 20 weeks each. And then within those semesters, we do 2 units at a time over 9 weeks. So I guess you could say really there's 6 short semesters, but they're fit within 3 main semesters. I'd also just like to say, just to finish on my last point, Fridays, we have a formally structured careers academy. So between 9 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon, we have structured workshops that integrate and sit by the curriculum. But we have experts coming to help you work on what your career aspirations are, workshops that extend upon the content in the courses that you're studying. We'll take students often into large consulting companies in-house so that they can work on how to do consulting case studies and so on. Now, we know not every student wants to be a consultant, but we still feel that it's a very valuable experience to see how, you know, skilled problem solvers go about their business.
We've had a more detailed question come through asking what kind of experience will you consider relevant to engage in the program? Must it be managerial experience?
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be managerial experience, but we find that candidates that have tended to have to manage some teams, they might not be large teams, but nonetheless, they had staff that have reported to them. They tend to have a deeper understanding of some of the issues that they need to deal with in terms of managing high-performing teams. Sometimes we like to see candidates who have managed budgets. We think that's important as well. But having said that, we have students join the program who might come from a legal background or a medical background where they're not necessarily managing staff and they're not necessarily managing budgets. So while I say some managerial experience is desirable, as is having run some budgets, it's not essential. As I said earlier, we are really looking for diversity in both careers and experience. So not necessarily managerial, but we do see a lot of candidates who have some form of managerial experience.
Another question's come through, and this is one that I've been asked many times when I've been talking to prospective students. Essentially, it's asking about the differentiation between the MBA, the full-time MBA, and the global executive MBA. Could you just spend, I know you've already touched on this, but maybe just another minute teasing out the differences between those 2 degrees, please.
So for a full-time MBA, the candidates have a minimum requirement of 3 years. They study full-time in Sydney over 18 months with classes during the day and some breaks at the end of each semester. So 3 years minimum experience. For the global executive MBA, the candidates must have at least 10 years experience, and these tend to be in quite senior roles with only 20 students per year going through that program. Just to give you an indication for that, of the type of candidate for that program, we have had the Chief Executive Officer of the Commonwealth Bank of Australia do that program. So the Global Executive MBA tend to be people who already have quite significant experience, strong networks, and they have been tapped on the shoulder, as we say, to be told, you have a great opportunity now to become the Chief Executive Officer of this organisation. That doesn't mean that they all work in large organisations. Some have launched their own businesses, some work in social enterprises as well. But the big difference, I guess, is the level of experience. And for the Global Executive MBA, the students do 2 weeks at a time in terms of their learning, and then they go back to the workplace for a couple of weeks, or in some cases a month or so, and then they do another module for 2 weeks, and that includes travelling to Europe and travelling to the United States, travelling to Israel, and travelling to India, to Bangalore. So big difference between the two programs. Most of it tends to be the experience of the people.
Well, thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I also see that Eric has asked, I work as a nurse with 15 years of experience in Mexico. Do I need experience in admin to be eligible? No, you don't need experience in administration to be eligible. In fact, people with clinical experience like you have an incredible amount to teach the other students about what it's like working in those high pressure environments. So no, you don't have to be a business person or have had admin experience to be eligible or to thrive in the program. We've had people that have run operating theatres in hospitals, and we know that once they get their MBA, they're in big demand in consulting, because consulting companies love people with very specific experience and their MBAs, which help the consulting companies then build their practices around those areas.
Well, thank you for those questions, Bruno and Eric. We're going to take a break from the questions for a while and get back into the presentation.
Yeah, so I put up on the slide here to say, well, or to give you some information on how this MBA differs from many. And I have a quote here where we talk about the MBA, the future, and the toolkit or the skills that are needed. And you'll see I've written here, in an era of smart machines, the activities humans will still be better at doing will require creativity, innovative thinking, complex critical thinking, moral judgments, or high emotional and social intelligence. So machines can only do so much. Obviously machines can be very clever, but they are programmed by individuals, by coders, and we're yet to see at least machines that can be highly creative or demonstrate a high degree of emotional or social intelligence. So the full-time MBA and the part-time MBA were built with that in mind. Oops. So almost all of these skills and capabilities need to be learned by doing them, and doing them enough to ingrain new habitual ways of behaving and thinking. This requires individualized developmental attention, mentoring, and real-time feedback. So in other words, you need to be doing lots of repetitions. We regularly say people don't go to the gym once to build muscle mass. They have to keep going and doing it on and on and on. And similarly with a lot of the skills that we're talking about there, we need to keep doing repetitions and getting feedback, particularly around complex critical thinking and innovative thinking, because often we are bound by our own mental experiences. And a lot of that is not going to help us solve problems in a world where technology is rapidly changing business models very quickly. And individuals need to embrace ambiguity and thrive in it. I see a question that says from Daniela, how hard is it to get an internship as an international student in Australia? How does the university support you to get one? So we have a careers team in this MBA, and from the very first day that you arrive, they will spend time with you to work out what your career goals are. And if you decide that you do want to do an internship, when you're 2/3 the way through your MBA, that careers team will work through our extensive network of contacts to hopefully place you within the company or the organisation or the industry or sector that you hope for. I mean, no university can absolutely guarantee you'll get an internship in a Google or an Amazon, but certainly Sydney University has an extensive network where we can use that network to place you. So relatively straightforward to get one through the program. And yes, the business school and the MBA program help you with that. Michael has written, I believe there is a part-time MBA. Is this different to the executive MBA? And that's correct. So I had an earlier slide you'll see that says there is a full-time MBA and a part-time MBA. And each of those has the same entry requirements, both 3 years minimum professional experience. The full-time MBA runs about 18 months and the part-time MBA, most students take around 3 years to complete that because they're busy working during the day. So they spread that out a bit more. So it's not the same as the full-time mode. But then separate to those is the executive MBA. So the executive MBA is where people have substantial experience. They've risen virtually to the top of the organisations that they're in or the fields that they're in. And they feel they just need to fine tune their skills in leadership and innovation. And that is the difference between the executive MBA with its global component and the part-time MBA. I should say the part-time MBA is open only to domestic students, so resident students.
All right, thank you for the questions, guys. Please do keep the questions coming in. We love them. We'll go back to the slides. So here's what the full-time MBA looks like in terms of its structure, with its focus on leadership and building enterprises of the future. So we have 3 core components that we say matches each of the 3 main semesters that you study. So you begin by developing your personal and interpersonal skills. So the first 4 units of study are very much about giving you the skill set to lead and manage people effectively, to be creative, to think critically, and to solve complex problems. So the first 4 units are about developing you, the individual. The middle component you'll see is business knowledge and skill development. So this is where we cover data, finance, strategy, marketing. I'll put that up in a moment, which is still very important for people coming into MBAs because some people come without experience in these areas. For those that might have some marketing experience, for example, you'll see that we have designed the program to be highly experiential, which is quite different to what some of you might have done in your undergraduate degrees. And then the final component is where the first 2 come together. So we take your personal and interpersonal skills and your business knowledge and skills and then cover how do we start to build the enterprises of the future. That is large corporations, it could be government, public policy, organisations, or it could be social enterprises, or for some, even their own startups. So there is a theme of entrepreneurship that goes across the program, but it is not just a program that focuses on entrepreneurs. So we see many students wanting to start their own businesses. Some have started their own businesses, but probably the most important thing is there are a lot of people who want the organisations that they work in to become more entrepreneurial in their approach. So if I go through the 4 areas, the first 4, leadership practice and development, and critical analysis and thought leadership. So the students do those in their first sort of half semester, if you like. They then move on to creativity, innovation and business, and the nature of systems. Each of these units, just so you know, is effectively 40 hours of class time and approximately 150 hours overall in terms of volume of learning. So that is working with your groups, preparing for classes, doing assignment work, doing field trips and so on. So approximately 150 hours in total volume of learning, which includes the class time. So I hope you can see there 4 very interesting and different types of units. The nature of systems, we believe that we need to think more from a systematic perspective and a multidisciplinary perspective when it comes to solving problems. So normally when we look at problem solving, we tend to focus just on what's in front of us and we don't think about the systems that surround us. And often the source of the problem that we might be trying to solve exists 2 or 3 systems above or below us. And we run that at
at an institute in the university called the Charles Perkins Centre, which focuses on curing disease in terms of type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular, and obesity. The second component is business knowledge and skills, and you can see there strategies for growth, financial management, innovation in strategic marketing, and data analysis and modelling. And there is a theme that runs across those 4 units, which is building enterprise sustainability. So 20% of each of those units of study is directed to how this disciplinary area views issues around sustainability, including climate change, environmental sustainability, but also social impact and governance. So by that time, our students are 2/3 of the way through their program, and then they come to bring that all together in the Building Future Enterprises. So they do leading business innovation, leading in a digital world, building global capability, and then finally, the very last unit for them is the capstone. And the capstone brings together all the learnings across the entire program. And the students are required to actually design and present a minimum viable product that supports the strategy of an organisation that we bring in for the students to work with. So that's the design of the program. We have some questions here. So if you just go previous, just a bit higher up. So is there a deadline for applying for scholarships for the August 2020 cohort? No, there's no deadlines for applying for scholarships. What I would say is you don't have to separately apply for a scholarship. Once we interview you, if we believe that you have the capability and mindset to thrive in this program, we will consider offering you a scholarship. So there's nothing additionally that you need to do for that. What we would say is we only have a limited pool of scholarship funds. So if you are applying early for a place in the program, you do have a better chance. And I don't mean to say that to pressure you or anything like that, but once our scholarship pool is exhausted, we then can't offer any more scholarships. So it does pay. This is a degree that you are really keen to do, to study in, that you don't delay in putting in your applications.
Is that a question we can answer now, or is that one to take on later, do you think, the one at the top there?
So Georgia says, seems like you're now only 4 students away from closing the MBA. Yeah, no, we're not. So we're not any students away. We do rounds of interviews. We have 50 places. I'm not sure how many have been filled. We know there are a lot of offers out there. I've done interviews today, for example, but no, so there are certainly still spots left. There are just rounds of interviews, but we would encourage you to apply at any time. At any time, we're fairly flexible.
Eric has come back with another question. He's a married gentleman with 2 children. Can he bring his family with him? He's asking, will he need a lot of money to be there? Is there any chance of working during the program? Also, my wife. Would you mind if I took this one?
Yeah.
Look, Eric, this comes down to a visa question, and we have to be careful about giving a visa advice because it's illegal for us to do so. But from my experience, many students bring along a family with them when they come and study. You will be, I'm assuming, on a student visa, which you will get from the electronic confirmation enrollment that the university will send you for you being a student here. If your wife wishes to join you, she can come on a spousal visa. And on that spousal visa, she can work if she wishes to. You're bringing 2 children with you. I don't know where you're coming from, but there will be a lot of things for these kids to do in Sydney. Sydney is a great place for kids to grow up. With the climate that we've got, we're spending a lot of time outside. There's lots of opportunities for the kids to be in school or doing things that they're really enjoying and making friends here that they'll hopefully have for the rest of their lives. Is it expensive? Yes, it is. The city of Sydney is an expensive city to live in. There are opportunities for you to get your children, I don't know what age they are, into primary schools or high schools, the government schools in Sydney. There are a lot of very, very good ones, and the cost is comparatively low. There are also some very good private schools. The cost there is usually a lot higher. When you are studying, excuse me, on a student visa, you're allowed to work 20 hours a week during semester, and you can work more during the holidays. But I am going to warn you, the MBA program is a demanding course, and I would be surprised that if a lot of students would have the opportunity to work as well as undertaking their studies. Having said that, I've spoken to a number of students who work for an organization in their home country, and they have organized part-time work with that same company or a connected company or a parent company here in Sydney, and gotten further experience from that as well as an income. Would you like to take the next question?
I'll just add to what Chris said then too. I mean, we've got some students in the current program that have picked up some part-time work. One in Qantas, for example, so that's a well-known airline. Some others that have worked in broadcasters. So some do pick up the work, and some have been offered work actually and sponsored as a result of that. But as was said, it's a busy program. So these have been very organised students who also need to make sure that if they're off to work in the afternoons, that they are still very much engaging with their groups and keeping their work up to date. And we tend to find those that do that actually the most organised. So they're so busy that they make sure they do structure time, really effectively. But it's a relatively small group that do that. Most, want to embrace this 18 months as a time to rest and think and learn and not have the pressures of work. But those opportunities do exist for those who seek them. Also, I guess I've been recruiting students into full-time MBAs now for nearly 20 years at other universities. And quite often I see a family come to do the MBA. It's seen as a great experience, particularly for the children, depending on what their age is. They get this opportunity to learn a new language, English. If they don't, they go to preschool or kindergarten or even higher levels of school. So it's a fantastic experience all around for the family. And as Chris said, again, subject to visa requirements, but you tend to see partners work, pick up various jobs. So it's a wonderful family experience, and I have seen it done. Sometimes the students will say they like the fact that Sydney's a different time zone from where they're at, because they don't get lots of telephone calls and emails during the day from the employment that they've left. So that works really nicely for them as well. We have a question, what are the chances of gaining admission if you miss round one? That's fine. There are still places available for the program. So I would just say, as sooner you put your application in, the greater the probability for you. Noting that our classes don't begin until August 2020, so we still have some time to go. But it's from about now that we start to see the volume of applications start to ramp up. So you're okay, and you have, in terms of, don't worry if you've missed round one. There are plenty of recruitment rounds. And Daniela, how important is the GMAT score for MBA acceptance? The GMAT, if you have it, we're happy to take that into consideration. But we don't see it as a major part of requirements for entry into the program. We tend to look for all-round skills and experience. And your aptitude for management studies is important. And I will interview you face-to-face. Sometimes we see programs that have GMAT, they do it because they might get 600 or 700 applications, and they can use GMAT just to cut the tail out straight away. We tend to be a little bit more holistic about this. If you have it, fantastic. But if we think a candidate has great experience and has done diverse things, whether they have a GMAT or not, I'm willing to talk to them and learn more about them to see if they're going to be a good fit for the program.
Well, we might go back to the slideshow because we do have only a few more minutes to go, but we'll try and get to some of those questions later if we can. Oh, is that the last slide?
Yep.
My apologies, and then we'll jump back to the next question.
So the question is, how many applications do you tend to get for a single cohort? Well, we only have 2 cohorts to base that from, but for 50 places, we tend to get about 3 applications per actual student comes here. So at the moment, it's been 150 for 50 places. Of course, not all of those applications go through to be interviewed, and then not everybody that we interview gets an offer. And that comes down to a whole lot of factors. It doesn't necessarily mean the candidate's not a good candidate, but we want to make sure we have a diverse cohort. And so if we have too many people from the same country or too many people with the same level of experience, that's where we'll start to sort of cut off our offers. So I think, again, if you can show, if you go to interview, that you have the capability and mindset to want to learn from others, and you have something to offer the other students in the program in terms of your experience, that's quite a critical factor for us. Now, the program is still relatively new, although Sydney University is very well known globally, and we really do expect, as the program continues, that those number of applications will start to increase. Because it's a new program yet, it hasn't qualified for any international rankings, such as the Financial Times, but we will be eligible for those rankings within a few years. And I suspect once that happens, we'll see our applications start to grow significantly. But I should say that the part-time MBA here and the executive global MBA here both have received the #1 ranking in Australia with the Australian Financial Review, which is a national global newspaper with a focus on finance and business. And so we're very pleased for that. And our part-time MBA has received that twice in a row in the 2 years that it's been eligible for that.
I often get a question, Professor, from students asking when they're going to be doing their internships and the job that they will get afterwards. What are typically the type of company or the specific companies that the business school has a relationship with and has seen students do internships with and get employment with afterwards?
Yep. So there's no typical company. We've got access to startups. We have good relationships with the Sydney startup scene, where there are a number of startup companies running through acceleration programs that I have involvement with and that I deliver sessions to. And so at that level, we sometimes see students who've come from large organisations such as oil and gas in Saudi Arabia, but they're very keen to be involved in a startup to see what the thinking's like, because they know in those large organisations they need to create new ventures within the organisations. So we have that startups, we have students that are keen to work in companies that have moved beyond startup and now are at their acceleration phase. So we often say they're scaling up, and that's a whole new set of problems and issues. So where a company now is generating some revenue, and it has to decide, does it use new distribution networks? Does it go global? Is it ready for its first round of what we call Series A financing, which could be $1 to $4 million? And a lot of MBAs who've come from established companies and organisations really relish getting some experience in those types of organisations, and often they have some experience to bring to them. Then we have those that have gone into social enterprises with their internships. They've gone into large corporations. We've had a number of students, for example, that worked in a geotechnical engineering consultancy firm, working on a wide variety of assignments. One particular was this company wanted to do some acquisitions in water and water filtration. And so the MBA students in teams did work for the company on that and received great commendations. Great to have them on their CVs in terms of the range of organisations that we've worked for. So we'd like to say, we don't come to you with here's 20 companies that you can work with. We tend to reverse that and say, where do you see your career going? What sort of exposures to sectors or industries or types of company that you'd like? And then we work with you to craft an internship or an experience around that.
We've had some more questions come in. First one is, what's the deadline for applications?
So there's no deadline at this stage. Just get the applications in as soon as you possibly can. This is the program for you. Once we get closer and closer to the start date, which is August, there will be a formal end to applications. That's probably about 4 weeks before we start. And by then, many students from different countries just can't get their visas in time. So while formally applications may close about 4 weeks before, we'd say make sure that you start much earlier than that. So it's a rolling applications, so any time. And if you put in an application and you get made an offer, the best thing is you're in the box seat. You can decide then as to whether you want to accept it or not. If we get full, then you may miss your place, but you certainly don't have to accept straight away.
All right. Helen has asked, is there a program I can do if I do not have work experience?
Probably the Master of Management program, which I talked about before, that has a global cohort and a lot of students that are coming from around the world, including Europe. There's also a component which is called the SEMS program, which is CEMS, that you may like to look up. Very bright students, but potentially some with not much work experience. And that program is a great program. And by the way, I should say, not only ranked #1 here, but ranked #1 regionally in the Financial Times. So quite a popular program for those without any experience.
Follow-up question. I'm not sure if we have a number here, but what is the employability rate for international students in Australia?
I don't think that's routinely collected anywhere as far as I know.
No, they do a graduate survey of students, and I know that within 6 months, I know our numbers are in the 90s. So they look at students who are not going on to further studies, who are actively seeking employment within the first 6 months. And I know that we have the overall domestic and international numbers combined. I don't know if they disaggregate them by domestic and international. I do know from my own research, I did a Master by Research in educational economics, and I know that it does take international students longer, and their starting salaries can be a little bit lower than domestic students, but that's true no matter where you are. So if a student from Australia came to your country, they would have the same hurdles to get over. But I know that having a University of Sydney testament, having a degree like an MBA under your belt, these things help you with that task. But I'm not going to say it any differently. It is more difficult for international students to get that first job.
Yeah, depending on what degree they have too,
yeah.
and what type of degree it is.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, with MBAs, you tend to get a lot of career support, incredible amount of support. And you did see, you might have missed it, but earlier there was a slide showing that the University of Sydney is #4 in the world in terms of employment outcomes.
Yeah.
So a degree here is going to give you escalate you up towards getting those outcomes that you're looking for.
Now, Eric has asked another question. What about the English level? What's the required score?
So IELTS 7 is our requirement. If you don't have that, don't hold back from putting in your application because we will interview you. And if we feel that you might not have that, or you might not have close to, you might just be away from that score, but not too far, we can seek permission to waiver that, but it's really on the basis of the conversation that I had with you. So we would highly recommend you get the IELTS score.
All right, guys, we are getting to the end of our time. I know you can't clap, but I'm sure in your own minds you'll send thanks to Professor Ford for making his time available. This is a wonderful experience, and students all over the world would like to speak to Professor Ford about this degree, so it's great that you've got a front row seat to this. Thank you for logging in. Thank you for spending your time with us. Remember that these are recorded, and if you want to watch it again or send them to colleagues, they'll be available in the next week or so. Any final thoughts before we wrap up, Professor?
No, thank you everybody for participating today and for those great questions. And I hope to greet you when you come to Sydney to study.
All right, guys. Thanks again.